Imagine God, before he's created, there are all these different possible worlds he could create. He could make this world or that world or this world, that world. But he wants, of course, to make a really good world. That's his aim, to create a really good world. And now suppose we ask ourselves, what is it that makes one world a good world? Maybe a better world than some other world. What would be good-making properties among these worlds which are open to God? He could create any one of them, let's say. Well, when I think about that, and it's not only me who has thought this, when I think about that, I think that one feature of a world that can make it a really good world is the truth of the whole Christian story in that world. I mean, think about the Christian story. Here is God, the first being of the universe, all-powerful, all-knowing, and the like, who creates human beings. These human beings turn on him. They reject him. They prefer their own glory to his glory. They reject this being that's created them. They turn away from him. They sin against him. Sometimes they mock him and the like. Well, now, what is God's response according to the Christian story? The response is not like that of some Eastern potentate to have them all boiled in oil or something like that. No. God's response is to send his Son, the second person of the Trinity, into the world to suffer and die, to suffer and die at the hands of the Romans, Pontius Pilate, and the like of that. So the second person of the Trinity has to undergo the suffering involved in this, and the first person, God the Father, has to undergo the suffering involved in seeing his Son treated in this way. And this is to make it possible once more for human beings to be in fellowship with God, to be justified before God, to be right in God's sight. Now, if you think about it, that's a display that's a kind of an absolutely over-the-top, amazing display of love. And it makes sense to me, at any rate, to say that worlds in which this occur are worlds that are very, very good worlds. That is an extremely powerful, good-making property of worlds. So if God wants to create a really good world, and if Incarnation and Atonement, we could just shorten the Christian story to that, Incarnation and Atonement, if that's a characteristic of many of these very, very good worlds, well, then he may very well pick one of them. But any world in which there is incarnation and atonement will be a world in which there is suffering, in which there is sin and consequent suffering, and not just a little bit of it, not just a insignificant peccadillo on the part of an otherwise admirably disposed angel. It'll have to be a whole lot more than that. How much more, it's hard to say. But I mean, the main point then would be that the good worlds contain incarnation and atonement, and worlds that contain incarnation and atonement are bound to contain pain, suffering, and evil. So that would be a suggestion anyway.